everybody, and welcome to another episode of Hey You Guys, the ever-popular podcast on pop culture, the 80s and 90s, by two dudes who lived through them. I'm your host, Jeffrey Mack, joined as always by the Rose Nyland to my Danny Tanner, Mr. Scott Boyd. And in today's episode, we're talking about those who we've lost in the early part of this year. And I think, you know, as we do these episodes, it's interesting. And Boyd, I don't know if you've ever had these thoughts, but I was thinking about this over the weekend. We may be coming to the age where we're starting to lose our heroes for all intents and purposes, or the people that really were the ones that we looked up to as children. And it's a not to make this episode a somber episode, but I guess it probably will be more along the lines of a somber episode, although we'll try to celebrate sort of, you know, the titans that we've lost. But I think it's really an interesting time point in our lives where, you know, we're in our 40s, we're getting into our 40s, and all of a sudden, left and right, it's, you know, there goes Danny Tanner, you know, there goes Betty White, there goes John Madden, who are the three that we're gonna talk about today. But it's, I don't know, it just seems like a realization that I had over the weekend that we're now entering that period where, unfortunately, right, all of these people that meant so much to us as children are going to, you know, one by one sort of be taken from us. So I don't know. So yeah, like I mentioned, this episode is, you know, really just an opportunity for us to speak a little bit about three people that, you know, meant a bit to us as children, and probably meant a lot to a lot of people around our age. So Boyd, you know, it's, I guess before we dive into each of those and offer some words, what are your thoughts? I mean, have you had that realization as well, that we're entering the period of sort of losing our heroes?
Well, thanks for bursting the bubble there, Jeff. I wasn't, and now I'm going to go to sleep crying. And but I mean, you're 100% right. It's a shame what life does to you. It's time. No one out. You know, what do they say? Time is undefeated, right?
Yeah.
So the older we get, the more that you know, people start falling off the edge of the earth, and it is what it is.
Yeah, no, totally. But so I mean, this episode, you know, obviously we started talking about doing sort of an in memoriam episode for John Madden, and then you know, very quickly it was like, oh, Betty White, and then I think the devastating news, and probably the one that was more of a surprise, was the passing of Bob Saget. So, you know, I'd love to spend a little bit of time in this episode to just talk a little bit about what they meant to us growing up, and I think, you know, we can give each of them sort of their due time. So Boyd, I don't know if you want to kick it off. We'll do it in chronological order. So I guess Madden being first. You know, what did he mean to you? Were you a big Madden fan? The person, the video game, the commentator, all of the above?
Yeah, all of the above. Here's my thing. So Madden always impressed me. I grew up with him obviously as a commentator, and then the video games obviously was a big deal, and I'm going to touch on that in a second. But what I really thought about John Madden, or what I really appreciated about him as I grew older, is, I mean, he played football. Nobody talks about that, and it's whatever, because he was a fine player, but he was an even better coach. Like, he was a dynasty creating coach, 10 years with the Raiders, Super Bowl. But, you know, his best work ended up being his commentator life. He was the best commentator of all time. But what's also really kind of funny is his legacy goes on through the video games almost more than anything else. And I'd love to get your perspective as well. But outside the video game thing, it's kind of what I aspire to be in a way. So I'm a good hockey player. I still play as a men's league player, but I know I'm a very good coach, and I really want to be a great coach. I showed it a little in my time coaching high school kids before I got married. It was something that I had the opportunity to do, to coach actually the team that I played for in high school. And I I took the opportunity and ran with it, and I loved it. Did it for
or
8 years.
Skated with it, right? He took the opportunity and skated with it.
Nice one, nice one. I actually am a little mad I didn't pick that up myself. And I really do look forward to the days that my kids are old enough where I can coach them to greatness, you know. Yeah. But however, just side note, I refuse to coach right now. I have we have 5-year-olds, right? And I don't want to be the coach when kids are picking their nose in the outfield or chasing a ball like a swarm of bees. It's not for me. But I even try to coach up some of the guys that I play men's league with. Sometimes they're like, yeah, okay, I'll consider
not very
advice.
Receptive to your coaching, boy.
But, well, sometimes they're like, okay, yeah, I care about this, and others just want to be left alone so they can enjoy their time away from their wives and drink some cold ones in the parking lot afterwards. But really, what I came to love about watching him as a kid, which I just learned about actually, is he didn't really want to broadcast. When they originally brought it up, like he didn't leave coaching to go to the booth. He just thought these guys were like a bunch of hairdos that he called them. But he really wanted to teach football, and he was told that you don't get a second chance at doing the commentating thing. So he took it, and man, his energy just came through the screen. And the passion that he felt for football and educating it was outstanding, because he thought that the broadcast booth people were, didn't really get the game, didn't understand. Right. But what he wanted to do was take it to the next level and educate. And that's what I appreciate most.
Yeah, I think I agree with you to a degree. I mean, I think for me personally, Madden was first a commentator, right? And sort of that was his identity for me. And I think you nailed it when you said the reason that I think he resonated so well with his audience was that he approached it. And I mean, I could be wrong, but I think it may have been the first time that somebody has approached it in this way, where he was teaching you the game of football using the play on the field as the illustration or the lessons, right? And I think that in and of itself was groundbreaking. I think it drew people in. It got people really excited about football. I mean, I think people could probably argue that John Madden was greatly responsible for the explosion in the popularity of the NFL, right?
I agree.
For the first time,
100%.
People could understand what was going on. So for me, it was, he was the announcer first, and then sort of the video game second. And I'm not a huge video game player, but I definitely probably played all of the Maddens, with the exception of the most recent, because it's just become where if you wanted to play against another real life person, you stand no chance because they're literally professional players. But my earliest memory of the video game, and I'm pretty sure this is Madden, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it might have been Madden Part 1, where when a player got injured, the ambulance would come across the field and just mow down anyone that was in its path, right? So
that was it was the first video game that did that.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah, and then go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. No, you got it.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the video games were interesting to me, but I think the other thing that's extremely interesting as it relates to the video games sort of ties back to his time as an announcer, right? And we just talked about him sort of educating the masses about the game of football and getting them to actually understand what was going on. And I think you could argue, and maybe it's not an argument at all, but you could say that the video game took that to the next level, and that now if you were to sort of poll people, maybe a little bit younger than us, about their knowledge of NFL football or their knowledge of just football in general, and even if you were to poll coaches, you would probably hear most of them say that they learned everything about football from playing the video game. They learned about different defenses and different offenses from the video game. And I think this is going back a few years, and I'm not a huge NFL fan, but there was a coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think his name was Raheem. I want to say it was Raheem
Morris,
yes, who I think went on record saying that he learned all about coordinating, the offense and the defense and being a head coach from playing Madden. So I think that's extremely interesting. And again, I think he's given credit for sort of the growth that the NFL has sort of seen, but I don't know that he's been given enough credit with regards to sort of his influence on the general knowledge of football as it relates to sort of the globe, right? I mean, people know about football and know concepts about football because of John Madden, whether it was he as an announcer or he as the figurehead of the video game.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you 100%, and I find that very interesting. And I listen to a lot of football talk, and when you see bad coordinating and poor time management in real life football, there are, certain analysts that will say, not like the broadcasters, but certain analysts behind the scenes will be like, I wish they'd hire a 12-year-old who's good at Madden,
right?
Because that thing would never happen. And it's so funny because as a guy who never really played, I never played, rec football. I didn't know the X's and O's until Madden. Madden taught me the X's and O's, and the more I played the games, the more I understood it, the more I watched him paint the screen. I just thought that was so awesome that he got a chance to do that. Now, and with the Madden game, think about it this way. There aren't other football games.
Right.
It's not like EA makes the Madden game. No other maker will go to that arena because there's no chance they could ever go to the next level that Madden brought it to. A couple innovations that I wanted to make a mention of: the actual team names and players, 1995, because most people forget that before that you saw Dallas playing Pittsburgh, not the Cowboys playing the Steelers. So number 22, number 8, they were running all over the field, not Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin.
Yep.
So this was, and also it was the first year for touchdown celebration. So 95 was a really good one. Also a big fan of Madden 96 because it was the first time you could create a player. Really fun to be 12 years old and create yourself as like this big giant football player. You go through the combine, you can use yourself in real games. Really awesome stuff. But I hold, it's the only video game right now that I buy because I don't have time for video games as much, but it's the only game that I buy because when I do have time, it's the only one I want to sit down, turn my brain off and just, and play. And it goes back to how I've played it throughout my life. When I was playing video games, that was always a mainstay. So for me, the pinnacle was starting in Madden 99, I think it was. But for me, it was Madden 2002 with my roommate in college. Or so it was 2000. Yeah, it was 2002. With my roommate in college, we did franchise mode. So this is where you could build a franchise. And we built a franchise, an entirely new team that we made up.
What was the team? What was the team name?
We developed. Well, I'm sorry.
What was the team name?
Oh, okay. It was the Witch's Brew, which is a throwback to a Homestar Runner cartoon. Are you familiar with Homestar Runner?
No, not at all.
Oh my god! So it was an internet cartoon that got big during while I was in college. Very silly, very funny, and we put we went through the logos that they had, and we made the color schemes. We designed the jerseys, but then also we had this fantasy draft, which means you have a draft against the computer, but you draft every player that you want to when it's your turn, and you pick your team. And we would play complete seasons over and over and over. I mean, we played a lot. Most days, wee hours of the morning. We had a lot of high fives, a lot of beer spilled. I don't know. I had so much fun with that I've actually kept that kind of going.
Yeah.
I don't play online. I don't like hook up with my friends, which would be cool, and which would be cool. But I just, again, I try to do it at my time because I don't have a lot of time. So I build this franchise. I still call it the Witch's Brew. I still have the same color scheme, and I try to build the same concepts. And again, it's the only game that I have and I care about.
No, that's awesome. Cool. So moving on, Betty White. The interesting thing for me, and I don't have a ton to say about Betty. I mean, everybody loved Betty, which is true. For me, two things sort of ring out. I think the first is I was actually in the shopping or the grocery store, I think in Whole Foods, whatever, checking out, and they had a magazine, and Betty was on the cover. It was Betty White at 100, and I was like, oh damn, she made it to 100. That's amazing. And then here like the next day, like she died, and that she was 99. She didn't actually hit 100, and I was just like, oh man, to be so close and not make it is disappointing. But in terms of just her career, I'm not the Betty White obsessor that I think you see a lot of people proclaim to be across the internet. But for me, as a young child, I remember going over my grandparents' house, and when I went over there, they had one television, and essentially I was beholden to watch whatever they were watching. And the three shows that they always watched, which were not at all interesting to a little child, were Matlock. Actually, there was a few shows. There was Matlock, Murder, She Wrote, Sanford and Sons, and then Golden Girls. So all of my memories of Betty White were really just being at my grandparents and being forced to watch Golden Girls, which never really appealed to me. I thought it was a show for old people. I should go back and watch a few episodes to see if that is the case. It probably isn't a show for old people, but that was just the way that I thought about it. But I got to give her credit. I mean, she was old as heck when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and the fact that she made it this long and still had a career is actually pretty amazing. So
it's really impressive for sure. And I think that you're right about the Golden Girls thing. I have a few friends who are, whatever, mid 30s, late 30s, and they love Golden Girls. And I think it's probably more so this, like, just this gang of friends, and they, they're older, but they still probably get into hijinks and whatever. So I bet you it's probably better than we think. But unfortunately, I don't have much to go on about personally.
We weren't Golden Girls fans, were we?
with Betty White, as much as, like, I love that she just showed up at random, as random cameos of herself, just being this badass bee, 99 years young, absolute fox. She's an avid animal lover. She's what everybody should really aspire to be. Like, she was kick-ass.
Yeah, and she was probably the last link to old Hollywood, right, if you think about that. So that golden age of Hollywood, I mean, she was probably the last of her kind, and now, Hollywood will transition to the youngsters and be a different place. But yeah, rest in peace, Betty. So
and the other one, the other thing that I thought was interesting that I read is that Betty White she was older than sliced bread. So sliced bread is the best thing since Betty White.
That's amazing. Sweet. So wrapping up the episode, and the one that probably hit me the hardest, and I'm going to assume probably hit you even harder, was the passing of Bob Saget just a few days ago. I think the reason that it hit so hard is because I think it caught everybody off guard, because this was a guy that still, was I don't want to say he was in the prime of his career, but he was still out there, still doing things, and he didn't look old, right? He still looked like Danny Tanner, which is the role obviously that he's best known in. And just to hear that he was sort of gone was very shocking to me, and I think I was probably the one that broke the news to you via text message. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to just take the rest of this episode to just talk about the memories or the best Bob Saget moments from your your life, my life, and things like that. So I'll let you dive in, since I broke the news to you, right? So I'm assuming you got a text message.
You did.
Me. Yep.
So you did. You broke the news. I was putting my kids down to bed in the bedtime routine as us parents understand it, which just seems to get longer by the day.
Yeah.
But I think my wife was like, reading a book at that point, and I got the text. I saw a little glimpse on my watch, and I was like, wait a second, what? And I was hoping I didn't read it correctly. And then by the time I got down from bedtime, a few other people texted me as well. As they all know, I'm a very avid Full House fanatic. And that's heartbreaking for sure. Killer comedian, so funny. And he got raunchier with age, which is funny too. Because people know him as squeaky clean Danny Tanner. But he did have a raunchy side. But I also found it interesting that raunchiness wasn't, it wasn't, well, when I found that out at first, I thought that he was putting on a bit for the Danny Tanner role, and he wasn't really either. So that duality was kind of funny and interesting. Before I dive into like the Full House thing, I think is one of the funniest non-Full House things that he did was he played this coke addict in rehab in the movie Half Baked. Yeah. He says to Dave Chappelle, marijuana, that's not a drug. I used to suck dick for coke. You ever suck some dick for marijuana? Yeah. Amazing.
No,
so good.
It was great. Yeah, I think Bob Saget, I mean, he was great for me. He'll always be Danny Tanner, because I also was a huge Full House fan. I mean, I looked forward to each episode every week, and loved all of the characters. I think the really interesting thing, before we dive in a little bit deeper, the interesting thing about Bob Saget in Full House is that he was not the original actor cast to play Danny Tanner. The original actor was, I believe his name was John Posey, and he actually recorded the pilot. Yeah, he recorded the pilot, and it just, if you watch the pilot, and you can find it online, he wasn't Danny Tanner, right? He wasn't. And then when you actually compare, John versus Bob, you can really sort of see the genius of Bob and what he brought to the role. So I think that in itself is really interesting, that he was probably pretty close to not getting that iconic role. And if he had not landed that role, who knows where his career would be. But what I would love to do, and I'm pulling this out of thin air, boy, so you can yell at me if this isn't going to work, but I know you're a huge Full House fan. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about some of your favorite Danny Tanner moments in Full House. I have a few of my own, but we can go back and forth. I'm just curious, sort of, what are the moments that stand out to you, if any?
I loved he played his role so perfectly. He was the perfect, again, the squeaky clean, figuratively and literally, as he was a neat freak, but he was the best. He was America's dad. He would, always be there with the words of wisdom. At times he would actually break down and say that, he doesn't know everything and we're trying our hardest. And that really gets you and says, all right, well, quote unquote, he's human, right? But he also would embarrass his kids by dressing differently to take out one of his daughter's friends' moms on a date. Or he would put on a rock and roll outfit and sing My Generation in the middle of the living room, which was one of my favorite things that he did too. So I'm not going to go into, too much more about specific things on the show, but I did want to share that I read some of the things that the cast talked about, how he was behind the scenes, and it really was inspiring. And I, spoiler alert, actually had a very quick conversation with Jodie Sweetin about him. Jodie Sweetin, more people are familiar with her as the role of Stephanie Tanner. So I had just watched his appearances on Entourage, and he was super dirty, super raunchy. This was when I was, I think I was 24, and I had a chance to meet her. And we talked about a few things, and one thing I mentioned was that, and I kind of asked about it, and was he just putting on a shtick for, for Full House? And she just mentioned how while he wasn't squeaky clean, he was actually a great father figure, and he truly cared about them, and she loved him so much. So I just thought that was just so cool, how they really were a family, even off set, and how it holds true to this day with the reboot of Fuller House, and even, I don't know, I think it was like a year ago or 2 years ago, he had like a birthday party, and everybody just spoke so highly of the relationship that they had with him, and it was truly inspiring.
Yeah, I think everything that you've seen or heard from people that knew him well painted him in a great light, and really just talked about how kind and generous and loving he was as a person. For me, it's interesting when I think back to Full House and the character. I don't know that he was my favorite of the male adult characters. I think I was an Uncle Joey fan, but Danny was just a great character. I mean, you brought it up. I mean, he's like the squeaky clean, neat freak, right? That's constantly cleaning. He's hilarious, but he can also be very serious and heartfelt, right? And if you think about, some of the episodes and sort of some of the lessons, and even if you think about the character, right, and some of the early episodes and what he's dealing with, right? I think in the show, he lost his wife when he was 30 or maybe before that.
Giving birth to Michelle.
Exactly, right? So here's a man who's not yet 30, who's raising three girls, right, and on his own, and doing a hell of a job, and bringing in Uncle Jesse and Uncle Joey. So even just as a character, what a complex character that they've sort of developed in sort of this envelope of a sitcom. But if you really think about the episode and think about the character, there was a lot of seriousness and a lot of sort of life lessons that were delivered from Danny Tanner, right? Delivered from Bob Saget. And then I just remember just a few of the episodes that stand out to me is the one where he and Uncle Joey dress in drag. I think they went back to their, I don't know if it was a college reunion or something, right?
Right, to the sorority house.
Yes,
they had to steal. They had to steal something back.
Yep, that was a great episode. And then I for whatever reason just loved all of the episodes with Danny and Vicky. I thought that was such a great pairing. His long-term love interest. Genuinely it was just a great show, a great family, just a great guy. And, to your point that you brought up a little earlier, he essentially had two careers, right? He had the America's Dad, for the most part, and then he had this sort of almost the opposite end of the spectrum character, where he was like this raunchy stand-up comedian. He was in Half Baked. He would make cameos in random comedies with his buddies. He would go on Howard Stern and all the time and talk about things. So, very, very difficult to pull that off, and he did a great job. So, I think he still had a lot left to give in his career, and it's unfortunate that we won't have that chance to experience it. But rest in peace to Bob. I mean, he'll definitely be missed.
That's for sure. And one as a final note, I wanted to read a quote from him. I just want to make people laugh. I want to bring people together, and then I want them to go home and feel good. And I really feel this. It's one thing that I kind of was taught when growing up, when I was trying to learn how to be my best self, is that I want to leave people better off than I find them. And I think that's a Bob Saget thing. And it's a very noble trait. And it's just a way to make the world better. And, he certainly did for countless of millions of people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's a great place to end this episode. But before we go, want to thank everybody for listening. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. And we're excited to kick off. I guess, we were on hiatus for a little bit with the holidays, and then with me getting sick again, can't catch a break. But looking forward to 2022 and I guess season 3 of the Hey You Guys podcast. And I think we have a lot of great episodes planned for this season. Probably a little bit different of an episode structure from what we've done in the past. We're hoping to dive a little deeper and have some more guests lined up. We have a few that have tentatively agreed to come on. Now we just need to work our magic to get them to commit to a date and time. But Boyd, yeah, I'm excited to kick off season 3. I'm excited to dive a little deeper onto some of the topics that defined our childhood, and I'm hoping that all of our fans out there are on board and psyched and ready to go, and hopefully 2022 will be a better year than the early part has sort of shown us to be. So with that, I want to thank everybody. If you're not following us on the gram, please do so at Hey You Guys Podcast, and we'll talk to you on the next one. Later.
Happy New Year, and remember, clean is good, dirt is bad.
That is true. Peace.
Come on, baby, show me the town.